Welcome to Comedy Courtroom, where the cases are outrageous.
He would strip, and he would have me strip and wear only this.
She badgered me. She wanted it twice.
Twice?
4, 5, twice on the weekends. She thought I was an old geyser.
Geezer. The word
No,
is
geyser.
I never use public restrooms, but I have a very weak bladder, and I had no choice. So I went to the manager.
Where comedians pose as attorneys.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this suit is tasteless. So is this tie.
Marry a dentist. You can always walk without teeth, but you can't chew with your toes.
God only knows what you have to do with a pool boy to get chlorine on your breath.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm sick, I'm crabby. It's that time of the month.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for the past several minutes, the plaintiff's attorney has been making a complete fool of herself. Now it's my turn.
Comedy Courtroom, where the court reporter loves the bailiff. The bailiff loves herself, and the judge loves walnuts.
Ladies and gentlemen, Comedy Courtroom is now in session. Please rise for the Honorable Judge, Chuck Barris!
Welcome to Comedy Courtroom. Welcome, jury. Our jury has been selected from our studio audience, and I would like to thank them for participating today. Thank you. The cases we try in Comedy Courtroom are loosely based on real cases that have been argued in other cities at other times. As we reenact each case, we will have 2 players portraying the people suing each other. Each player will be trying to convince you, the jury, that he or she is right. Remember, whomever you choose will receive $25. And if your verdict is the same as the verdict in the original case, you, the jury, will divvy up $250. Let me remind you, our players are not actors, just people like you and me. Well, maybe not like me, but like you. We'll be back to hear our first case right after this message. All right. Welcome back to Comedy Courtroom. Thank you, Commissioner of Music. Bailiff, let's have a case, please.
This case is Vera Houston, the plaintiff, versus Rodney Ballantyne, the defendant. The case was originally tried in the Dade County Superior Court, Miami, Florida, on August the 1st, 1982.
Oh, thank you very much, Bailiff. All right, jury, in this case, the plaintiff, Ms. Vera Houston, is suing her ex-boyfriend, the defendant, Mr. Rodney Ballantyne, for taking her on a safari and in endangering her life. Now, she's very annoyed, and she is suing Mr. Ballantyne, a licensed big game hunter, for $1 million in negligence. First, we will hear from the plaintiff, Ms. Vera Houston. Ms. Houston.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Rodney Ballantyne and I had a relationship for 3 years, and because of his profession, being a big game hunter, we rarely saw each other, and so I suggested that I go on a safari with him. I did so, and we were out on the plains of Africa, and I had wandered away from the Land Rover when, unbeknownst to me, Rodney had spotted a grazing herd of elephants.
A what herd?
A grazing herd of elephants.
Excuse me a second. 1 minute, please. Court reporter, could you read that last question back? I wanted to make sure I heard that. The one about the grazing. The herd question. Well, never mind. Continue on, Mrs. Houston.
Well, as I said, they were grazing, and he immediately ordered the entire party to get back into the Land Rovers with their guns, and I had somehow gotten separated from the party, and as I was strolling back and enjoying the flora of Africa, I suddenly heard this thundering footsteps behind me. Well, I turned around, and there was this gigantic bull elephant charging towards me. Well, I started screaming.
Did it do anything to you?
Well, I did when it got to me.
What did it do?
Well, it picked me up in its trunk, and it flung me from side to side, and then it threw me down on the ground and absolutely wiped the floor of Africa.
Well, there's not a floor in Africa, Mrs. Listen. But that's quite all right. I can see that you've been damaged, and you're humiliated, I imagine.
I was humiliated.
Are you suing for $1 million?
Bones.
I see, I see. Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think you've stated the case very well. Thank you, Mrs. Houston. You sit down. And now we will hear jury from the defendant. There's another side to every story. So here is the big game hunter, Rodney Ballantyne. Mr. Ballantyne?
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm afraid my lady friend is rather spoiled, and from the time that we decided to take her on the safari, she was somewhat of a problem. She wouldn't take the required amount of clothes. She caused a lot of problem with overweight and too many clothes. And this one day, we'd already captured our quota of elephants we could shoot, and so we were only going for camera.
Yes.
And she was asked to stay in the Land Rover and not go out with the group. And she got out and wandered around on her own while we were filming these elephants with cameras.
And did the elephant get her and beat her up?
And the elephant got her. She's very fortunate she wasn't seriously hurt. As it was, she has only minor injuries.
Oh, only minor injuries?
Only minor injuries. I feel that the fault has been hers, and that she would not listen to expert advice and follow and stay with the crowd rather than wandering on her own.
I see. You feel the fault is hers, and she should have just followed your advice.
That's correct.
I think. Thank you very much, Mr. Ballantyne. All right, jury, we have heard the plaintiff, and we have heard from the defendant. Now let's hear from their attorneys. First, the attorney for Ms. Houston, Mr. Max Alexander. Mr. Alexander.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, your judgeness. My client, Barris Houston, was brutally beaten by a wild elephant. I'm not talking about a young Republican in heat. Because of the negligence of this man, Mr. Ballantyne, by the way, nice jacket, circus in town? Get back to the story. They spot a herd of elephants, which reminds me, I have a Weight Watchers meeting tonight. There's a guy up there that's so fat that when he walks backwards, you hear this noise. Beep, 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 beep.
Let's stay to the case, Mr. Alexander.
Back to the case. Mr. Ballantyne calls himself a professional hunter, which should not be mistaken for an unprofessional hunter, which instead of using a rifle will use cheese Danish. I personally don't like hunting myself. I'm from the big city. My idea of hunting is putting a roach motel under the sink. But Mr. Ballantyne then tells his people, after seeing these herd of elephants, to leave the Land Rover, leave their guns there, but to take their cameras. I'm in the middle of Africa. I see wild elephants coming towards me. What do I take? My elephant gun? No. A bazooka? Maybe. My Instamatic camera. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Alexander. That was our attorney for the plaintiff. That was Max Alexander. Now let's hear for the attorney for the defendant, Harris Pete. Mr. Pete.
Your Honor, this case is disgusting and has no business in a courtroom, especially one as dignified as this. Ms. Houston had no business going on safari. Mr. Ballantyne knew this, and only by constantly badgering my poor client was she able to obtain his consent. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not against women going on safari. It's common knowledge that I love women, and I've got the receipts to prove it. But I'm against her going on safari, roaming around Africa, flaunting her wealth, bathing in expensive perfume. Even now, Your Honor, take a whiff. The entire courtroom smells like an old catcher's mitt. So you were jostled by an elephant. Poor baby. One look at that face tells us she's done more with worse than that unfortunate elephant.
All right. Thank you very much. That was very good. Well, jury. Thank you, Mr. Pete. You have, it's in your hands. It's in your hands. Does the plaintiff, Mrs. Vera Houston, deserve $1 million because of Mr. Ballantyne's negligence? Or is the defendant, Mr. Ballantyne, the innocent victim of a spoiled and careless playgirl? Jury, you talk it over and agree on a verdict. And we'll be back to hear your decision right after this message. And welcome back to Comedy Courtroom. Our jury has deliberated and has reached a decision. Jury, have you found for the plaintiff the somewhat spoiled Vera Houston, or have you found for the defendant Rodney Ballantyne? What is your decision?
Your Honor, we have found for the defendant, Harry Ballantyne.
Really? Congratulations, Rodney. You won $25. Way to go. Now, let's see how the jury's verdict compares with the verdict of the real case. Keep in mind, jury, that if your decision matches the verdict in the original case, you will divvy up $250. Here's the decision handed down by the Dade County Superior Court in Miami, Florida, August 1, 1982. The court decided that Ms. Houston displayed childish behavior and in a moment of peril disregarded Mr. Ballantyne's important instructions regarding her safety. On the other hand, Mr. Ballantyne, as the professional in charge, should have known better than to approach the elephant without a firearm. Therefore, the court found for the plaintiff, Vera Houston. You were wrong. Oh, jury, you were wrong and you didn't win anything. Now let's meet our players. The part of plaintiff Vera Houston was played by television producer Sally Marshall. Sally. And the part of the defendant, Rodney Ballantyne, was played by corporate executive and the former Mercury 7 astronaut, Mr. Gordon Cooper. And we'll be back with our next case on Comedy Courtroom right after this message. Back to Comedy Courtroom. Bailiff, let's have the case.
This case is Gerald Zarella, the plaintiff, versus Lily Zarella Robinson, the defendant. The case was originally tried in the Rhode Island Superior Court, Warwick, Rhode Island, on December 2nd, 1977.
All right, thank you, Bailiff. Jury, this is a touchy case. The plaintiff, Mr. Gerald Zarella, sitting right there, is suing the defendant, his former wife, Mrs. Lily Zarella Robinson, for adultery. Now, that's an emotional case, adultery. So I want you to keep yourself calm and pay attention to the facts. Let's start by hearing from the plaintiff, Mr. Gerald Zarella. Mr. Zarella.
Your Honor, I'm astonished.
Stand up, Mr. Zarella. Go ahead.
And dumbfounded to think that my ex-wife thinks water underneath a dam with her having an affair behind my back. We were at a local country club, our country club where all our friends belong, and I was astonished to find out, while in her drunken stupor, she told all our friends for the last year of our marriage, she was having an affair with my best friend. I should say my formerly best friend.
Then say that.
Go ahead. Thank you. I must tell you, Your Honor, that this lady is an adulteress.
Right.
That she told the world that we had some type of scripted sex. I knew nothing about scripted sex. I like to think of myself as a normal man. But I don't understand why she had to get drunk and come a year after our divorce. I gave her everything she wanted to tell all our friends that she had a sex behind my back for the last year.
Mr. Zarella, you're claiming $100,000 for what?
Well, Your Honor, I had $100,000 in medical bills I'd like for you to look at from the doctors and psychiatrists.
I have the bills. Thank you, Mr.
Whether she used a pistol or a mouth, I was wounded.
Mrs. Zarella, that's fine. You sit down. Thank you very much, Mrs. Zarella. All right, that was our plaintiff. Now we'll hear the other side of the story. And I want you to pay attention. We hear the defendant, Lily Zarella Robinson. Mrs. Robinson.
Your Honor, Mr. Zarella, Gerald, was my first husband. So I had never been intimate with a man before. So at the beginning, I thought that our sex life was normal. But I soon found out that there was something wrong with him. He started to act funny. And he would ask me to do weird things. And he was writing those scripts, and I had to... we couldn't touch each other all the way through those scripts.
What kind of scripts were they? Did they have names or anything?
Would you like me to give you some names?
Yes,
well,
give me a few.
One of them, like Hot Monkey Love, that was one of his... That was his favorite one.
What else?
Woodshed Discipline, Diddler on the Roof, that was embarrassing. And Zarella does Spaghettella.
Whoa.
But yes, Your Honor, Lily Does Philly was a hot one too.
What one?
He was terrible. Lily Does Philly.
All
that
right,
was
now.
terrible.
Just go on with the case. What happened exactly after
And then,
that?
you know, we would do that for hours, and then we were so tired we couldn't even make love anymore. So he never came up with anything. He never did nothing. We never made love.
Why did you go to his best friend?
Well, I called him because I thought since he knew him for so long, maybe he could help me shed some light into his sexual hang-ups.
And you told him about this at a country club?
Yes, Your Honor, I did. And then he told me, call Gerald and discuss it with him. Well, he got furious. He got vicious. He got worse.
That's fine. That's fine. Now, you sit down. You control yourself. I understand it's an emotional situation. Jury, we have heard from the plaintiff and the defendant. We'll now hear from their attorneys. First, the attorney for the plaintiff, Mrs. Zarella, Joey Gaynor. Attorney Gaynor, please. Take off your sunglasses, Mr. Gaynor.
Certainly. Your Honor, members of the jury, I think this is a cut and dry case right off the bat. First of all, Mr. Zarella here many times sent flower to his wife, sent her bouquets of flowers, but not because he thought she was very good in bed. He did it because he thought she had died. I mean, with Sleeping Beauty here, she talks about being tired during sex. Sleeping Beauty here, he'd have had more fun with the Seven Dwarfs. Let me put it to you this way. When I found out my good friend, Mr. Zarella, was going to get a divorce, I tried to help him out. I lent him my car so he could take her somewhere, like up to Lover's Lane, someplace where he could take her and have an intimate moment and rekindle that spark of love. Let me show you the car I lent him, huh? Right there. I lent him this car so he could take her up there. There it is. It's a 67 Alpha, 2600, 50,000 miles. I'm letting it go for 3,500 and... Your Honor, I submit this as Exhibit A. You may want to take a look at that. I saw the heap you drove up in this morning, and... I will tell you one other thing. Exhibit B. This proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's no way that he could make love to this woman. She wanted to play 18. Who could make love to a woman wearing this, huh? Here's a piece of evidence. Who can make love to a woman going,
All right, thank you very much. All right. We've heard from the lawyer for the plaintiff. We heard from Joey Gaynor. Now let's hear for the attorney for the defendant. Let's hear from Glenn Super. Mr. Super.
When it comes to sex, Mr. Zarella claims to have an open mind. It should be closed for repairs. I just called an expert witness on the phone. Listen.
Hello? This is Dr. Ruth this time, eh? What is your sexual problem?
Dr. Ruth, what do you think of a man who makes his wife act out scripted sexual encounters?
That is the sickest thing I've ever heard. Goodbye.
It was Mr. Zarella that drove his wife into the arms of another man. During sex, he'd stop and say, "Cut, that's a wrap." Mr. Zarella had a marquee over the bed flashing Wednesday bargain matinees. One time, Mr. Zarella got out of bed, walked into the audience, and collected money for the Will Rogers Hospital. Mr. Zarella here referred to my lovely client as a... But we know he's as pure as a Filipino election.
That was the attorney for the plaintiff, Glenn Super. Jury, you've heard both sides now of this case. You've heard from the plaintiffs and their attorneys. And now you must decide. Should the plaintiff, Mr. Gerald Zarella, receive the $100,000 damages he is suing for, or is the defendant, Mrs. Lily Zarella Robinson, past the boundaries of the law, so to speak, thereby freeing her from anything, having to pay anything for her indiscretion? Now you think about it, you talk it over, you reach a verdict. And we'll be back to hear your decision right after this message. All right. Welcome back to Comedy Courtroom. Our jury has deliberated and has reached a decision. Now, jury, have you found for the plaintiff, the very angry Gerald Zarella, or have you found for the defendant, Lily Zarella Robinson? What is your decision?
Your Honor, we have found for the defendant, Lily Zarella Robinson.
See how the jury's verdict compares with the verdict of the real case. Keep in mind, jury, if your decision matches the verdict in the original case, you will divvy up $250. All right, here's a decision handed down by the Superior Court of Rhode Island, Warwick, Rhode Island, on December 2nd, 1977. The court acknowledged that the plaintiff, Mr. Gerald Zarella, did not catch his wife in the act or find out through a third party. His former wife told him a long time after she had remarried and started a new life. But in 8 states, including the state of Rhode Island, telling a former spouse of a past adultery is as good as being caught in the act. It is called criminal conversation. Therefore, the court found for the plaintiff, Mr. Gerald Zarella. All right. Jury, you were wrong, jury. Now, let's meet our players. The part of the plaintiff, Gerald Zarella, was played by a corporate vice president and one of Tennessee's favorite sons, Mr. Al Bubis. Take a bow, Al. Very good. And the part of the defendant, Lily Zarella Robinson, was played by one of the newer golf pros on the women's tour, Nicole Martell. Way to go, Nicole. Well, that's it for today. I want to thank our bailiff, Rhonda Shear. Rhonda, our comics and our players, and of course, our court reporter, Larry Goddard. Thank you, jury, and a special thanks to our Federal Commissioner of Music, Milton DeLugg, and the comedy band with a thug. Way to go, Milt. Bye-bye.